Auto sequence start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Bienvenidos al Bunker de NAC una vez más, y esta vez en un programa muy especial porque tenemos a nuestro primer invitado internacional, que no es otro que Volko Ruhnke, que teníamos muchas ganas de traerlo aquí al programa con la excusa de que vamos a editar próximamente el juego Almoravid, que lleva mucha gente esperando desde hace tanto tiempo y que Carlos ha estado actualizándonos sobre todo el proceso, pero por fin está aquí, ya lo tenemos a la vuelta de la esquina, así que este mes tenemos a Volko y un montón de preguntas que hacerle, entre ellas preguntas que han hecho otros autores y preguntas que nos habéis dejado en Twitter y otras redes sociales. Así que vamos a empezar saludando a Carlos. Hola, ¿qué tal, Carlos?
Hola a todos, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes.
Y José Luis, como siempre, va a empezar a la entrevista hablando un poco del autor y de su vida y de su obra. Así que, José Luis, puedes empezar con ello.
Buenas tardes a todos, bienvenidos al búnker. Y bueno, yo me disculpo de antemano con Volko por mi inglés, ¿vale? Bueno, bastante pobre, pero bueno, menos mal que esto está grabado y podemos cortar y no veréis seguramente las peores escenas, ¿vale? Así que, bueno, comenzamos. Volko, tal vez 59 años, ¿vale? Vive en Williamsburg, Virginia, y de orígenes alemanes, ¿vale? Volko Ruhnke es un diseñador de juegos y exanalista de seguridad nacional de la CIA, famoso por diseñar juegos de guerra pues, basados en motor de cartas como Labyrinth o Wilderness War. También es el diseñador de la serie Coin de GMT Games sobre la insurgencia moderna, que incluyen Andea Navis, Cuba Libre, A Distant Plane, Fire the Lake. Ha ganado múltiples premios por el diseño de juegos de mesa, incluidos 5 premios Charles Roberts, 2 de los cuales por diseño de elegancia por Wilderness War en 2001 y Labyrinth en 2010. ¿eh? Y ganó el Campeonato Mundial de Juegos de Mesa con Saratoga en 2001. Bienvenido al búnker de Wargames más famoso del mundo, Volko. No te preocupes porque aquí estamos protegidos de las bombas. Es genial tenerte aquí. ¿Cómo estás?
Well, I'm very happy to be here and feel very safe indeed inside the bunker. Glad to be here.
Vamos a preguntar, ¿vale? Vamos a hacer una batería de preguntas breves en las que, bueno, será contestar una cosa o la otra, o ambas, o lo que tú quieras, ¿vale? Volko. ¿Musulmanes o cristianos?
The question is Muslims or Christians?
Yes.
Yes, neither. I'm an atheist.
¿Prototipo o módulo de Basal?
Yes, both. There are advantages to each, and you should not rely on just one. Especially if you only do a vassal module, you will miss physical issues in the final production. But if you only have physical prototypes, you won't get the amount of play testers and play testing that you need. So I would not give up either. I do both physical and vassal play testing.
¿Sistema táctico, operacional o estratégico?
Yes, I love operational. I play everything, but it's the operational that's the most interesting. And I think it's the operational where we don't have enough historical war games yet. So that's the area I am deepest into, operational.
¿Una serie de televisión o de online para Wargamers?
Oh, goodness. You know, can it be a YouTube channel? Does it have to be a professional? I mean, I really like Kings and Generals on YouTube because they have, yeah, okay. Because you mentioned strategic, operational, tactical. They do so many different conflicts from history in detail, and they cover the strategic and then a lot of operational, which is so hard to find, and then the tactical as well. So Kings and Generals. A second one is Rise of Empires. There are two great series, Rise of Empires. One is the fall of Constantinople, and the other is the war between the Sultan and Vlad Dracul in Wallachia. And they both also have excellent documentary detail and dramatization. So that I recommend that one.
¿Y una película?
Oh boy, there are so many. I mean, one comes to mind that is so good is Das Boot.
Transport.
Das Boot in German.
Ok. Sobre el wargame que vamos a editar, El Rey en el Norte.
I've heard of it. I don't know the game, and I have to tell you, I know nothing about the history. It will be very new for me, which is
Do you
good.
know the Carlist Wars?
I do not. I do not know that history. Yeah, I have to admit.
¿El wargame favorito?
I have to say, overall favorite war game is Combat Commander Pacific by Chad Jensen and Kai Jensen.
Excelente.
Even though it's not operational, it's tactical, but all around best executed war game in my view.
¿Autor de wargame favorito?
Wow.
Cool.
I don't know that I want to say that. I do very much miss Chad Jensen, who I mentioned, but it's impossible to name. Boy, it's impossible to name one favorite. There are so many contributors. I don't think I better say that.
No. Carlos, here, no. Maybe
Sorry,
it's
Carlos.
Ok. Vale, tú has sido analista de la CIA, ¿vale? Pero ¿has visto acción en algún momento? Como el Jack Ryan de Tom Clancy.
No, nothing like that. I had a long career. I found it very, very interesting, and I think I learned a great deal, and perhaps I was of some use, but no, nothing like Jack Ryan and Tom Clancy.
Vale, tengo entendido que los wargames se utilizan como aprendizaje tanto en la CIA como en West Point y así como muchos oficiales en las academias. ¿Qué diferencia hay entre jugar un wargame y preparar una operación militar?
Well, you're right that there's a whole industry that I think is growing, and it's not just in the United States, of using war games to prepare military and other thinkers and officers. Of course, of course there are huge differences. If you're asking what is the difference between playing a game and reality, it's like what is the difference between playing a historical board game and real history. It's of course very different, and it starts with the fact that the war game is a symbol of reality. It is not reality. It is a simplification, a vast simplification of a very complex reality that we use to try to understand the reality better. But it's, of course, not at all the reality, because we have to leave out so many aspects of the real world. So that's only the starting point. Of course, there are many ways we can talk about the difference between a game and real life, or a movie and real life, or a book and what really happened. All of those things may help us understand real life, but always fall short, of course.
Ok, entonces, ¿por qué le sirve aprender con un juego?
Right.
It's-
Why do professional practitioners like soldiers run games? And it's the same reason that economists use mathematical models to understand real economies, and political scientists use models to understand political systems, and scientists use models to understand nature. They are simplifications carefully built and used to help us try to understand the much more complex systems of the real world, and in this case, warfare. How do we experiment to try to understand what will happen in a war? We can't experiment by running a real war, for example. So we might experiment to learn and to train our thinking by approximating, simplifying carefully and as best we can what we think the real war would be like, and then we play the game to learn something, always understanding that it's not the same thing, but it can show us something that is useful or true, even if it's not the full, complex, real-life thing.
Volko, ¿qué te inspiró para convertirte en un diseñador de juegos? ¿Y cómo empezaste en la industria?
So I was playing war games from a young age for some decades, and pretty soon discovered that I could change a game that I bought with just a pencil. I could change some things a little bit to make it something I liked better. And eventually I got to knowing a historical topic. It was the French and Indian War. Knowing that topic and well enough that I was not satisfied with all the games that I could buy to explore that history. And I love games, yes, and I also love history. And so I wanted to have a game about that history. And a friend told me you should just design your own. And I did that. I just designed a game about the French and Indian War that had everything in it that I wanted to play. And that became Wilderness War from GMT Games.
¿Cuál es tu proceso para diseñar un juego nuevo? ¿Desde el concepto inicial hasta el producto final?
It begins with the idea that there's some aspect of history, in my case, military history, that I feel is not adequately represented already in war games. So it maybe is like I just was explaining about the French and Indian War, that there were games about it, but not with everything I wanted about that war. How do I bring everything about that war that I want to see to the table? And what mechanics do I need? It might be for the coin series, for example, that there were very, very few good games about modern insurgency, internal warfare, guerrilla warfare, even though that was a very common type of war in history. And I thought there aren't enough games, so let me make some. I know something about that topic, so I think I can design a game about it. What mechanics should I use? How should I represent that? And what can I borrow from other games, and what can I change to be a better fit for representing that real world type of war on the table? And it's similar for Levy and Campaign, that I thought there were not enough operational level games, and the ones that there weren't enough medieval games about the Middle Ages, 1,000 years from 500 AD to 1500 in Europe, but not as nearly as many games as the next few hundred years, or the last 100 years especially, and not enough at the operational level. More battle games, more strategic games, not enough operational, and they didn't have everything I wanted to see from the Middle Ages, the feudal system, the logistics systems. So how can I do that with game mechanics that I know, or that I can change a little bit or invent to bring that history to the table? So that's always been my process.
¿Cómo consigues balancear el realismo con la jugabilidad de tus juegos, especialmente en esos juegos que se basan en eventos históricos reales o conflictos históricos reales?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, because balance is exactly right. I don't just want to have every realistic possibility and every detail in the game. I want accessible games, meaning I want more people to be able to learn them and enjoy them and play them for fun, not work. And I think that's especially important for my designs because I don't start with a topic that is necessarily very popular. My first coin series game was insurgency and counterinsurgency in Colombia. And that was not an issue a setting that a lot of GMT fans said, yes, I need a game about Colombia. I thought it was, of course, very interesting. But I thought to be able to convince more players to join me in what I think is a very interesting story, I want to have it be as easy to learn as I can. But in balance, there are many, many aspects of historical dynamics that I want to have in the game. These are details. And so, so how do I balance? And if I do that with well thought out rules and cards, and we have art that helps that and play aids, that we get a lot of historical dynamics plausibly represented. Realistically is probably too strong, but realistic enough that you can see something of the real world in a way that it's not too hard a work to learn and play it. Then if we do that well enough, then it's not just balance, it's elegance. We get some of each, right? And so we're working very hard in the initial design, in the ideas, in the play test with the developers to be elegant in the design. Lots of history for not too many difficult rules. And a lot of that is, what do we leave out, right? Not just what can we put in, but do we really need this? Does this rule give us enough because it adds difficulty? Does it give us enough history, right? We always ask that question. And in the end, I want, as the designer, to be able to answer for every rule in the game, for every game mechanic, for every card, and so on. There's two questions. How does this help play? How does this make it more interesting to play the game? And how does this bring me into the history? How does this rule or this card or whatever in the game show me something about the real world, right? Everything has to satisfy both of those questions to achieve that proper balance, and I hope elegance in giving you a lot of history with a reasonable number of rules.
¿Qué papel juega el testeo del juego o cómo realizas el testeo de juego de tus juegos?
There are really two aspects to the playtest to talk about: the developer and the playtesters. So the playtesters are so important, and so I do what I can to attract, to lure as much free help, because I can't pay them. They get a copy of the game, at the end, but free help that I can to play the game during development as many times. And it's never enough, right? I mean, I now, with Discord, for example, for Levy and Campaign, we have a whole Discord channel dedicated to development and support of Levy and Campaign series games like Almoravid. And that's a great place. In fact, it was the original reason to have that channel. It's a great place to attract and support playtesters playing the games. But it's it's hard and frustrating work because you're playing the game that's changing. If you're a playtester and you're basically doing these experiments, you're trying out the game, you're giving feedback, and as you're playing, the designer is changing because he's getting the feedback. It's in development, and by the time you're done with the first game, it's already a different game, and you have to kind of start your experiments over a little bit. So I'm very, very grateful for all the playtest work that is that I get for these designs. Then there's the role of the developer, and this is, I think, different for everybody, and it's been different for different of my own projects. But there's always somebody, and maybe it's more than one person if I'm lucky, who helps not just organize the play testers and the play testing, but interpret for me, tell me what problems are, and tell me, and be like an editor for an author. It's like if you have a writer for a novel, you usually a great writer needs a great editor to be the main initial audience, the reader advocate, to say, this chapter doesn't work. I know you love it, Mr. Author, but it's bad. And so in the development process, I've very much looked to developers to be that player advocate for me, in addition to the play testers, and to basically to be somebody who's working with me close enough and knows the project very well, and to say, this is a problem, we have to fix it, because it's harder for me to see as the designer, because I think it's great.
You need a meta player who breaks the game, no?
Very much. That's critical, because if you don't have that before you print it, you will after you print it, right?
Yeah.
So we know this. Yeah. So please break my game before we print it. Thank you.
¿Puedes ponernos un ejemplo de algo que haya sido particularmente dificultoso o un problema que hayas tenido que sea especialmente problemático en alguno de tus juegos y cómo has conseguido solucionarlo?
I think what's on my mind right now with Levy and Campaign is the how much work has been involved in just balancing the scenarios, which you think is, when you have this whole system designed and it all fits together, to write the scenarios so that the two players both have a roughly equal chance to win the game, you think would not be so hard, and it's been very hard. And so when we look at an initial printing of Nevsky, this is true for Nevsky, and this is true for the earlier version, the English version of Almoravid, we did not have enough testing of the scenario balance for the two sides. And I think it's hard for a 2-player game. It's easier for a 4-player game like Coin Series, because the different players kind of balance each other. If one side is stronger, then first of all, experienced players know that, and they ally together against the stronger side. Or if somebody gets ahead, the others ally together to stop him. So in a way, it's not as difficult a challenge with the Coin Series as it has been with Levy and Campaign. And then each game has at least 6 scenarios, and they all have to work, and they're different, and it's a game and its history. So history is not always balanced, right? So then you have to get very tricky in how you write the scenario, that it's a fun game for 2 players and they can each expect to have something to do and to have a chance to win, when you're looking at a specific period in history and 2 sides and it wasn't equal. So now you have to do some tricks in how you give the victory points, or how you scope where you put the boundaries of that game. You know, which times do I choose to represent in a scenario so that I've got the best, most interesting contests from history to play as a game. So all of that has taken a lot of thought and effort and testing and tuning to get it right. So I'm very proud of where it is now with what will be the second edition of Nevsky and with the NAC version of Almoravid.
¿Cómo consigues estar al día con la industria, las tendencias en la industria, las nuevas tecnologías que se incorporan en los juegos y cómo consigues incorporarlas a tus diseños?
Yeah, I don't do it enough, for sure. First of all, I think it's very important for game designers to play lots of other designers' games and to play the latest games. And I wish I could do that more, you know. But before, when I was working and before I retired, I played almost no new games other than my own because it was all my time was for that. Even now, retired, I have much more time, but not enough to play. What are the latest ideas in just mechanical board game design? Because the state of the art of board game design goes forward. It gets better and better, like any other art. And so that's important to stay up to date. Technology, I am not very knowledgeable about modern technology, but I do try, and I know that since the 1990s with the internet and social media, so many fantastic possibilities are open for something as traditional and low technology, really, as board games, as tabletop games. And I hope that my presence in social media and use of tools like Discord that I was describing for the development of the Levy and campaign series helps my designs, you know, keep up with what is possible, because what is possible in collaborative game design, in having many people who have a passion for the same project work together, applying crowd wisdom in effect to game design through something like an online studio that we have in Discord for Levy and campaign. I hope that you know, I am making as much use out of it as I should be.
Uh-huh. Hablando de tecnología, hablando de tecnología aplicada a juegos, ¿qué opinión tienes de, por ejemplo, algunos juegos que están empezando a utilizar aplicaciones para manejar el modo solitario, aplicaciones de móvil, por ejemplo, o tablet, e incluso de inteligencia artificial aplicada tanto a generación de mecánicas como de arte dentro de los juegos?
Yeah, I admit that most of that is above my head, meaning I don't really understand not only the technology but the issues. I don't myself play many solitaire systems. I did some work many years ago on solitaire on paper, okay, not by app, just paper charts. Solitaire for my games Labyrinth, and then for the Coin series, Andean Abyss, and so on. And I did that because I thought I had to reach more players, again, for topics that I knew were new to gamers, and I just wanted to make sure that people who wanted to play solitaire could play it. And there wasn't a lot of that in historical board games. There wasn't a lot of solitaire systems that come in a box for a war game that is a multiplayer war game or that is a two-player war game. So it was new ground, and I'm proud of what I did, but it was very soon surpassed, made better by other people, by other designers. And I have not been able myself to keep up with that. It's not my strong suit. It's not my talent, I think. And to go beyond that and now apply electronic technology, apps, and artificial intelligence is even further beyond what I feel like I can understand. As far as art goes, I have to say that my opportunity as a game designer to work with artists personally is so important to me. That is, I always want to have a rich conversation with artists who are working a game that I have designed, because for the art to be just right is so important. It's more important, I think, than if you're doing art for a book or something, because it's not just the beauty, and it's not just the atmosphere that transports you to another world. It's the support of the art for the mechanics of the game, to make the mechanics of the game, how you play, easy to see. The art has to be easy to use, has to fit the design, the game design. So there's so much that goes on there. I don't know how. I can't. It's not in my imagination how I could lose that personal relationship with the artist. I mean, maybe it's possible with technology, and I don't know, but I don't have it in my mental capacity to see how that would work without another human being, to work with as an artist. I don't know how it would work for me.
Yeah. ¿Cuál de tus juegos dirías que es el que estás más orgulloso y por qué lo seleccionarías respecto a tu otro trabajo?
Yeah. Which of my children do I love the most? Yeah, it's a tough question. Each has its role and its place and leads to something else. I have a special place in my heart for the first one, because on the first one I was the most alone, and so whatever it has in it that's good, I can be proud that I did it without more help. So if I look at the first of the coin series, Andean Abyss, Volume 1, or the first of Levy and Campaign, Nevsky, Volume 1, it's not that they're the best games. They're probably not the best games, because we learned as we went, it got better with Volume 2, and I had more help, but it was the first. And so it was, a little braver than the ones that came behind, maybe. And so maybe that touches my heart a little more.
Carlos, ¿tú también prefieres a tu primerizo?
Yo diría que el primer juego, quizás esté más orgulloso del Tanto Monta que de la carga de los Tres Reyes, porque es más completo, mucho más dificultoso y
Si lo vemos ya.
me ha hecho invertir mucho más tiempo.
Pero el primero seguro que tiene un lugar especial, ¿no?
En el corazón.
El primero es lo que dice Volko, te encuentras como la experiencia como autor, esto rompes, digamos, ese paradigma de ver tu juego publicado, esas sensaciones que se sienten, ¿no? De que el producto tuyo llega a los demás, el someterte a la opinión del público, y eso lo he vivido yo con la carga de los Tres Reyes, está claro. Y muchos de los miedos y de las dudas que tienes, pues como autor, porque también se tienen, pues claro, con el que se va a experimentar de manera diferente va a ser con el primer título que sale publicado. Sí.
Bueno, antes de nada quiero preguntarle algo que me ha surgido ahora sobre el bloque actual. Y es, ¿te has planteado alguna vez enseñar diseño de Wargames a nuevos autores?
Yes, I've not only considered it, I've done it a little. First of all, in my work life before I retired some years ago, I had the opportunity to help spread the use of board games, tabletop games, and especially the design of games, not just playing commercial games, but designing them ourselves, to spread the use of that for the purpose of analysis in my work and in my community. And we even created formal training programs to help teach the use and design of war games and other board games, political games, economic games, and so forth at work. And while I was there, it was successful. So I'm very proud of that. And in the hobby area, and just as a private citizen helping also professional people, I've had the opportunity to give talks and also share advice and feedback and mentorship with other game designers. So you can find my talks about how I design games and what I think is important in the process. You can find my talks on YouTube. We ran a contest called Zenobia a couple years ago, which was attempting to attract more diverse game design participation in the hobby about all kinds of historical games, including war games. And that involved teaching and mentorship, especially of contestants in the contest. And Zenobia continues with an effort to have another edition, Zenobia 2, in the future. Again, something I'm very proud of. So I do try to take advantage of any opportunity I get to share any insights and feedback I have for others to design games. It is a special thing about board games, I think. To go back to how did I first have the idea to design a game? I was playing games and I had a pencil, I had tastes, I had preferences, I had ideas. When we look at historical games, every historical game, every war game is an interpretation by a designer and a design team. It's one interpretation, right? It's like writing a history book. There's always more to say. You can always bring new ideas to understanding an episode of human history because it's so complex. We can't put it all in a simple model like a war game. So, and with this hobby, with board games, maybe unlike computer games and electronic games where you have to have specialized knowledge and access to the code, the computer code, here we can do it at home. We all can design, really. And why not? Because we all have knowledge that we bring to the table that's different than the designer. We have preferences, we have opinions, and we have a pencil.
Bueno, vamos a hablar ahora un poco de Almoravid, del próximo juego que vamos a tener por fin después de tanta espera, que la gente lleva esperando la versión en español mucho tiempo. Así que, José Luis, creo que tienes un montón de preguntas y cosas que hablar del Almoravid.
Vale, vamos a entrar en el bloque del Almoravid. Vale, antes de nada, Antes de nada, quisiera hacerte una pregunta sobre la época de Almoravid. La llamada Reconquista, ¿vale?, se realizó durante 700 años, ¿vale?, en un mundo sin libros, un mundo sin escritura y, en definitiva, sin memoria. La población en los reinos musulmanes estaba totalmente reconvertida y con unas condiciones de vida bastante mejores que en la zona cristiana. No había unión entre los reinos cristianos, al menos durante bastante tiempo. Por otro lado, el excedente de población en el norte, menos fértil, era un problema para sus gobernantes. Con todo esto en mente, ¿sigues creyendo que a ese periodo histórico se le puede llamar reconquista o es una conquista de manual?
Everything you said is true about the general story of the 700 years of what is called, at least in the West, Reconquista. And I don't have a useful opinion myself about what we should call it. Yes, 700 years is a very long time, and we could say, who should worry about who owned what 700 years ago, you know, whether it's reconquest or new conquest. I was satisfied with the term Reconquista on the box of the game on Almoravid because we know the term, because it has a meaning to most of the audience, which is, by the way, not Spanish-speaking wargamers in the case of the original edition, but English-speaking wargamers. But English-speaking wargamers, I would expect, when they see the word Reconquista, it takes them immediately to medieval Spain. That's the purpose of what goes on the box, is to tell you right away and show you with a picture right away, what is this game about? Where does it happen? Am I interested in that, right? That's the purpose, the function of the cover of the box. So, Reconquista, that word, we can debate technically, is it a good word, is it a bad word? But it has a very specific and exact meaning of that 700-year period that is where the 2 years of 700 that Almoravid is trying to show you. So we start at the very, very outside of the issue with the word Reconquista, but Almoravid will take you zero down to a very small piece of time where some of the things you describe about the Reconquista were true. And some things for a short time maybe were not true. For example, all of the Christian unity in what was at that moment the Kingdom of Leon under Alfonso VI, right? That was an unusual moment in which the Christians then could make a jump forward into Muslim territory. That is the first half of the story in Almoravid, the game.
Almoravid es el segundo juego de la serie Levy and Campaign. ¿Qué aporta de nuevo Almoravid?
Oh, yes. So a great deal. And also it brings aspects that are not in the later volumes that are unique to the subject. For me, the series, Levy and Campaign, also coin series, it's very important that we have both. This is another balance, like, you know, like history and difficulty of rules. This is another balance. In a series, there has to be familiar core rules, familiar core dynamics. So if I've learned one, then I get a reward if I also play 2 and 3. There's something the same. That's under the name Levy and Campaign. But it cannot be too much the same, because I don't want you to play Almoravid and think, oh, this is 13th century Russia. It's just shaped like Spain, right? That would be a failure in the design. And so what does Almoravid bring new? Hopefully, it brings you to Hispania in 1085 and 1086. which Nevsky does not do. So how does it do that? It's not just a different map, but it has to be also different rules, because the military, political, cultural, geographic, weather dynamics, and so on, were different. It's a different place and time than the previous volume and then later volumes. So the rules for supply are a little bit different. The nature of the fortifications are, it's many high quality, high technology for the 11th century Muslim stone fortifications everywhere. Well-maintained Roman roads. There was none of this in 13th century Russia. Okay? So the environment is different, meaning the rules are different. The movement is a bit different. In some ways, in Almoravid, it's simpler. You don't have to worry about sleds in Almoravid. That's a big deal. You don't have to, there isn't that much happening in winter. They took a break in winter. So they don't, you don't have to worry about different kinds of transportation, carts and mules. That's it. No boats and so forth. Okay. That's one aspect of difference. The political rules. I have a whole video on YouTube about Taifa politics in Almoravid in the game, because working with the researcher, Albert Alegrehove, we really realized that even though it's an operational game, we needed the political system of why and how these kingdoms fought, including the idea that the Muslim Taifa states, the emirates, the Muslim kingdoms, because they were militarily weak, paid a lot of gold dinars to the Christians. And often the Christians would fight so that against the Muslims, so the Muslims would pay them the money to not fight anymore. This doesn't exist in Nevsky or Inferno or Plantagenet. It's only in Almoravid, because it's so important to understanding the operational maneuvers that occurred in those years in Andalus, in Hispania. So it's in the game with unique political rules that are only in Almoravid, and so on. Now, there's also learning. I mentioned some things get better as we learn. So there are some cases where the way that storm works or siege works to resolve battles in the game is a little bit more refined in Almoravid and continues forward to the later volumes than it was in Nevsky, because I didn't have that idea yet in Nevsky, right? For example. So there's a little of that. But I think most of what's new is so that this game transports players to a specific place and time that's different.
¿Qué te inspiró para su diseño y por qué este periodo específico de la historia?
It's a great question. So with Levy and Campaign series, as with the Coin series, I had an initial plan of where I wanted the series to go and how many games. And in both cases, I wanted to just do 4 games. And my initial idea for Levy and Campaign was I would do a game sort of in each corner of medieval Europe, more or less. Starting with the Northeast. And then I was going to do Scotland, and then I was going to do Spain, and then I was going to do the Holy Land. And that was it. And I think I was talking about that in an interview like this one. And Albert Alegrehove, who lives in Barcelona, is a wargamer there, got in touch with me because I had mentioned, I think volume 3, I want to do about El Cid. That's all I didn't have a very specific idea, but I just said that, because why? Nevsky, there's a movie. I was going to do Braveheart, there's a movie, El Cid, there's a movie, So it wasn't a very concrete idea yet. But he said, there's so much more. He got in touch with me, Albert, and he said, there's so much more interesting history during that 700 years that you shouldn't too quickly decide just about El Cid. You know, you should look at what episode. And I said, you're right. And will you help me? And so that's how Albert became the researcher for the project, because I didn't really for Nevsky have Russian or Baltic or Scandinavian help until later, when the design was mostly done. So I thought, here's an opportunity to have a Spanish wargamer help me on a game set in historical Spain. You know, that's a fantastic opportunity. And so I put Scotland aside. I still haven't done it. And volume 2 became Almoravid because of Albert. And we looked together. We looked together at different episodes of warfare and different Christian advances and Muslim counterattacks. And when we looked at all of those, these 2 years, 1085 and 1086, to me seemed so interesting, so dynamic. There was a lot of movement, because that's important for games, that there's a lot of movement going on, campaigning on both sides. The Christians take Toledo, a huge advance, and they're trying to take more. And here come the Almoravids and push back the next year. And each player would get a chance to have that powerful force doing something, and the other players just trying to hold on. And I thought this is the right 2 years to pick out of those 700 for our operational system. And as a bonus, El Cid is there a little bit.
El arte es de Iván Cáceres. Explícanos cómo fue tu trabajo con él.
Yes. Well, let me add to that the game board art is also by a Spaniard, Chechu Nieto Sanchez of Barcelona. So I had a Spanish researcher, Albert. He was in touch with Despertaferro and other Spanish historians and experts to check our history. I had Ignacio Cobos Rey doing art history for us on banners and font. Ivan Cáceres Cruz doing most of the art, and Chechu, who did the map, and he had done the art for most of my previous games. So I had a long history, but first time now something in Spain. So it's a very Spanish production, which is fantastic. And Ivan was great because he came in with GMT doing the cards and the banners and other details. And we loved it so much that we asked him to do the cover as well. And I think it was fantastic. And I wish I could work with Ivan more. I know he's moved on to other projects, but you know, he's a war gamer. That's important. He's a Spaniard. That's important. And he's a highly talented artist. He's not only a war gamer, he's a war game designer, you know, so he can think about function as well as beauty and immersion at the same time, because he knows that. He knows it. He's an insider. So that's so fantastic. And I'm just not surprised, but I am delighted at how positive the reaction to the art has been. Well, this is Ivan right here. How does he do this? This is not a real medieval. It looks like it's really a medieval illustration, right? It's not. It's him. But he studies what that looks like, and he reproduces it custom for us. So fantastic.
Sobre la traducción al castellano, ¿has tenido parte activa en su proceso?
So I have had a part, and I leave it up to you and your headquarters in terms of how active, because I don't have the capacity to check the translation work, but I have had this opportunity through this edition and through this translation work to now have what I think is the most official version of Almoravid, because, you know, we have, for the first edition, more errata than I would like, that mostly has to do with scenario balancing that I mentioned. And it's there, and with a pencil you can play English language Almoravid just fine. But now we will have it, pristine. It will be as it should be, finally. So that involved your organization and Carlos being very patient with me in terms of repeated additions and changes to get it where I want it to be, which I believe is where it is now.
Bueno, ya lo has dicho, ¿vale? Almoravid tiene una serie de mejoras, ¿no? ¿Cómo ha sido trabajar con Carlos para hacer esta versión lo más perfecta posible?
Well, it's been very smooth from my point of view. I don't know how Carlos feels about it, but it's great to collaborate and have something together. I met Carlos, of course, years ago in Badajoz at Biotacon. We played 12-12 Novice de Tolosa together. And I had the opportunity to introduce him and Tantamonta to GMT. So that was a great honor for me. And so now that's all paid off for me, I guess, because I got to work with him on this edition of Almoravid.
Nada, para mí siempre ha sido un placer y saber que él ha estado dispuesto siempre a escucharme, a oírme y ayudarme desde el primer momento. Él fue quien me introdujo a GMT, con tanto montón como bien ha dicho. Y yo solo puedo estar agradecido y siempre se lo estaré, porque si yo voy a ser algún autor conocido en el mundo va a ser gracias a que él aquel día me escuchó y me abrió las puertas a GMT. Así que a él lo tengo pues en un pedestal, ¿qué voy a decirte? Gracias a que él me puso en contacto con NetBeats y el proyecto le gustó a él. Así que nada, solo puedo decir de Volko cosas buenas y para mí ha sido un placer estar atento en las mejoras que él ha ido diciéndome que había que realizarle al juego. Y trabajar con él es muy fácil porque él lo hace fácil. Volko hace que trabajar a su lado sea muy fácil porque se implica muchísimo como autor. Y además me consta, por lo que yo veo en los grupos de Discord de Levy campaña, cómo él se involucra con el resto de autores de la serie y cómo está siempre dispuesto a ayudarles. Y hace un seguimiento brutal. Así que solo decir que es un maestro del que hay que seguir aprendiendo y en el día a día y que dure mucho entre nosotros haciendo Wargame.
Vamos, para acabar el bloque de Almoravid, dinos, para aquellos que no estén del todo convencidos para comprar Almoravid, dile, ¿qué les dirías para hacerlo?
What I would tell them if they're considering acquiring Almoravid is, what it gives you that I don't think you can get anywhere else, that you maybe are interested in and maybe are not interested in. But it is a more detailed understanding of how medieval armies went to war, maneuvered across medieval Spain, and interacted with the politics of Christian and Muslim kingdoms at the time of the Reconquista than I think you can find anywhere else. It is a little of the strategic level of politics and diplomacy. It is a little of the tactical level of knights fighting in the field and archers and storming stone walls and besieging and starving out garrisons. It's a little of that. But it's mainly, how did these armies form? How did they move? What did they need? And how did they do that in the context of Taifa politics, Christian states, parias payments, Reconquista, and in the context of the beginning of the age of the heavy armored knight. And in the context of the clash between the Christian feudal military system that was developing, the Muslim military technology that had existed a long time, and the special African armies that the Almoravids formed and brought to Spain in those days. If all of that sounds like something that would be interesting to experience, I don't know where you can get that in Wargames except Almoravid.
Vale, pues vamos a pasar a las preguntas de la afición, de los fans. Fernando.
Sí, tenemos un montón de preguntas que nos han dejado en Twitter y en Discord y bueno, en un montón de sitios. Así que vamos a empezar así un poco para hacerlo rápido. Daniel Hernández pregunta que si volverá Volko en algún momento a alguna convención de Wargames en España.
Yes. Hi, Daniel. Thank you. I loved my visits to Spain and was twice in Badajoz for BellataCon and, of course, participated online later. And I have not yet been able to come back, but I really do want to. And one aspect of that is the first visit to Bellata. Afterwards, with my wife, I had the opportunity to tour some of southern Spain, Sevilla, Granada, and so forth. And the second time we went back to Badajoz, we went north and east, Toledo, and La Rioja and El Ferrol and the north of Spain. And I have left untouched for me the east of the country, so Barcelona, Zaragoza, and I would love to come back and finish that part, but I don't know when.
¿Tienes en mente algún otro diseño con temática española o que se desarrolle en la península ibérica?
I would not rule it out, but I do not have any project in mind. We have so many Levy campaign designs now in work that there's not even room there for me to do, I think, anymore. I will be involved, but we have other designers from our Discord studio doing them. And one idea is to spread out, to cover different environments and hopefully different centuries. And so Spain happened to be near the very beginning, which was fitting, certainly. But at least we've touched it. We could do much more, of course, much, much more. But we've at least touched it in Levy campaign. So I don't have any plans right now. Could happen.
¿Qué consejo podrías darle o qué consejo darías para conseguir atraer nuevos fans a Wargames? O dar a conocer los Wargames a otra gente que juega otro tipo de juegos?
Yeah, I think the key to interest in Wargames is interest in history. People play games and tabletop games for many, many different reasons, and there's social and puzzle and competition. But the unifying passion for Wargames, I think, has to be the passion for history, the desire to explore history, the desire to travel in time through playing a game. And I'm glad to see that there are more and more games that are not war games that do that for other aspects of history, like political history and economic history and cultural history and social history. And so I think if you're playing any of those games and you're thinking, well, do I want to do the investment of learning a war game? Look at it as history and consider the importance and the interest of military history. Military history can be a harsh thing. It can be ugly. Wars are ugly times. And they are consequential. That is to say, very many courses of history went one way or another because of the nature and outcome of wars. Unfortunately, but that is true. And so, is your time travel through history everything you want it to be if you leave military history out? Maybe. It's for your interest, but military history has a lot to say about which way things went. And war games are a great way to explore military history.
Javi de Null tiene unas cuantas preguntas en Twitter, que él siempre nos sigue muy de cerca, y el trabajo de Volko sabemos que le gusta especialmente, así que voy a leerte unas pocas. Muchas veces Carlos Márquez ha hablado de la ayuda de Volko y de su ánimo para continuar con el juego del otro lado de la colina. Volko ha jugado.
I absolutely have, and hi Carlos, my great friend Carlos Marcos of Granada. Yes, not only have I played The Other Side of the Hill, but after Carlos showed me the game in the Beata, I built my own set. I actually had my own physical prototype of the game, and not only played it myself, but brought it to my local group, and we played it and provided some feedback. And I did all of that because I was fascinated by the game because of its perspective, because it offers you something that you don't get in other games about European World War II. And that is not just running the war, which you are from the Wehrmacht's, the German army's point of view, but managing the politics within the organization, managing the cliques within the military, the ideologies within the military, the desire to advance your career and your friends' careers in the context of the war that is first going well and then not going so well. All of that is something that I think is very important to understanding military history and human history in general. And that is, all organizations, all communities internally have factions, have groups that have their own interests within the larger interest of the whole organization. And it can be very difficult, or at least incomplete, to try to understand a war effort, to understand an army at war, if you don't look at those internal conflicts, those factions. And Carlos's design does that so well, and it's great fun to see it play out. So I was very intensely interested in it, and did indeed play it, and I'm glad to see that it will be seeing reality. We'll be seeing publication.
Además, vamos a hablar muy pronto del otro lado de la colina y vaya, estamos deseando poder compartir con todo el mundo lo que tenemos preparado para el lanzamiento y muy pronto, ¿verdad, Carlos?
Correcto. Se va a hacer un lanzamiento internacional que creo que hará que el juego llegue a todas partes de una única manera, y como bien dices, pronto habrá más noticias al respecto. Y esperemos que en Estados Unidos pues la gente lo respalde también, claro.
Javi también pregunta si has tenido muchas críticas por hacer juegos que rompen un poco el molde de los conceptos clásicos de Wargame con la serie de Coin o Levy en Campaign.
don't think I got criticism as such. I think reactions that I did get, which I can understand, is that this is not what I'm a war gamer, and this is not what I'm looking for. You know, I'm a war gamer, and this is not exactly a war game. And some of that might be because they look a little different, you know, wooden pieces instead of numbered counters, for example, or areas instead of X's, for example. But I think it's more than that. I think mechanically, I have tried to reach beyond the war game tradition that I am a part of that tradition. I come from the old Avalon Hill SPI game design workshop 1970s war game tradition. That's me too. But I try to reach beyond that to take whatever mechanic I can to bring the history to life, and to do that in as elegant way I can. That is as much history for as little rules burden as I can manage. And so I've reached to other forms and other mechanical innovations in my games. So I can't think of somebody criticizing, oh, don't do that. But certainly that's not for everybody. And so it might be, you know, Coin Series does this thing that I'm not interested in playing because it's not, I'm interested in the traditional thing, which is fine.
¿Crees que estamos viviendo la era dorada de los wargames?
I do. And the evidence for that, for me, is not only how many high quality productions, high quality designs we have available and coming out. It's not just that. That's important. But the evidence is how many young people I see playing war games. Because for much of my life, the concern was that we had a golden age in the United States. We had a golden age in the 1970s, and there was some in the 80s. And then by the 90s, we're worried that computers and collectible card games will take everything over, and there'll only be us old guys who played it back then, and then we're dead and it's over, right? I mean, that was the story then. And the absolute opposite has happened, which is that we have newer blood and richer blood every year in the hobby. And now when I get together for war game events, I'm the oldest guy in the room. You know, it's a growing, youthful, energetic community that is producing more and better and enjoying more and more. So that the golden age is happening and is ahead of us. I mean, I don't know when it will end. I don't see what the end is. We're continuing to rise with, by the way, the rest of board games, which continues to rise in popularity.
¿Cómo ves el panorama actual editorial? Bueno, no sé si estás muy al tanto del panorama actual de España en cuanto a wargames. ¿Te has interesado por ello o conoces juegos de editoriales españolas o cada vez más juegos de editoriales españolas?
Yeah, so I know a fraction. This is the thing, because there is so much happening. It's a very vibrant community, and so even after attending, you know, two war game conventions in Spain and making the friendships that we've already been talking about, and the partnerships, including those involved in Almoravid, there are still many Spanish designed games that I don't know. And well, my local club, I belong to a local club, and we rotate the members choosing a game, and we all play the game and talk about it afterwards, like a book club. And we're about to learn Crusade and Revolution by David Gomez. So I don't know it. I've, of course, seen it a lot, but now, starting actually tomorrow night, I'm going to learn that game, which is, is very well known here. Spain does stand out in Europe. There are a number of strong communities. I'm sure you're aware. Britain has had a strong wargaming community. France has had a strong wargaming community. The Italian wargaming community, which I've gotten to know better in the last couple years, is very strong. Poland is coming on in terms of the wargame scene and design and publishing and review. And I actually thought that the Spanish scene, there was so much to say to the world about what was happening there in wargames that I wrote an article for a project that's not yet published, but about Spanish wargaming, for a compendium of articles about European wargaming. And so I'm hoping Euro Wargame, it's called. I'm hoping that gets published, because I do have a lot to say about what I saw and see in Spain, in the wargaming community there. And so I hope to leave it to that article to do the talking in detail.
Vale, JL Saura en Twitter nos ha preguntado que cuándo y cómo te vino a la mente Almoravid para desarrollarlo.
So I'll refer back to my answer earlier about getting to know Albert Alegre, the researcher for Almoravid, and that I started the Levy campaign series with the idea of looking at medieval warfare in Europe at the operational level in more detail, and that I had originally wanted to do Russia, Scotland, Spain, and the Holy Land, and I had done Russia, Nevsky, a look at 2 years or so of campaigns there, and that Albert helped me find what we thought was the most dynamic and interesting 2 years of the 700-year Reconquista, and set about designing it. And I did it right away because I had that opportunity. I had Albert to help me, who was going to give me access to Spanish language sources and Spanish historians that I could not get at on my own. So that was like a golden opportunity, a walk-in to fall into my lap saying, I will help you. Albert saying, I will help you design this game, research this game. So that's why I did it.
Pues para terminar este bloque voy a hacerle ya una pregunta a Volko, si os parece.
Claro.
Volko, ¿tienes abierta la posibilidad de publicar algún juego con otra editorial distinta de GMT Games? ¿O te consideras un autor exclusivo de ello, salvando el tema de las licencias al extranjero, como pasa con Almoravid y NAC Wargames, ¿no?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that question. I am a freelance designer, so I'm not officially a part of GMT Games. I have a long relationship with GMT as a publisher, and I love GMT. I love their games. I love their art. I know their process very well, and it works for me. And importantly, GMT has been very willing to offer on their pre-order system, P500, whatever I wanted to do. So they asked me to do certain things, but also I said, I want to do this. And GMT said, okay, well, you designed it, we'll put it out there. So I've never had really a reason to go elsewhere. And I am now, for the first time, going to have a design published completely elsewhere, not associated with GMT. And that is Hunt for Blackbeard, which is a little 2-player game that I've had with GMT in the past, but did not really reach enough of their audience. And we tried to make it work for some time. And I got distracted by Levy campaign and Almoravid and other projects. but now I've returned to it, and I happen to know a local publisher here of historical games, Fort Circle Games, and they were interested in Hunt for Blackbeard, and so we're going to do the game there, and so it will be the first game of my design published without GMT involvement, which is fine for GMT because they have plenty. They have plenty of me, and they have plenty of other projects to list.
¿Qué le preguntarías tú?
Pues al siguiente autor yo le preguntaría, en el diseño de su juego, ¿qué fue lo que le hizo disfrutar más del mismo? Y al contrario, ¿qué fue lo que le encontró más complicado y más pesado en ese diseño?
I think I most enjoy seeing people play the game, the finished game, and then reacting to it, including in ways that I didn't think of. Because as I design, I worry a lot about how will players react, and what will they like, and what will they maybe criticize or dislike. And I'm almost always surprised that they like something I did more than I expected, and they dislike something I didn't expect they would dislike. And especially I enjoy they do something different. They players innovate when they play, and they always seem to take the gameplay somewhere I didn't expect and maybe draw from it lessons that I didn't know. And so I love that because it's the interaction. I feel like through the game, it's our interaction of our minds.
Okay.
Great.
Oh, and what I didn't like, well, the reason there are so many ideas for games and only a few prototypes and very few of those are published is that usually the initial part of game design is very exciting and fun, and you're using your creativity. And then you have a long period of hard work to try to find all the mistakes and make sure everything works and make sure all the text is correct and check out all the art and everything fits together and all those production issues. And that's hard work. And so, I don't necessarily, I mean, I love to, of course, see the finished product come together, but it's not necessarily my favorite part of the process. It's the part we have to do so that people can enjoy the game when it's actually out there in the box.
Vale, vamos a pasar te vamos a hacer un par de preguntas sobre NAC Wargames, nuestra editorial. Hemos empezado a distribuir juegos y hemos abierto nuestra web para Estados Unidos y Canadá. ¿Te opinas que tenemos un hueco en ese mercado, en esos países para una editorial como NAC?
I think so, because I think that there's a lot of American wargamer focus on European history, and I think that the perspective of the designer and the producers and the artists matters. It matters culturally, it matters regionally. And so to have that different flavor, whatever the topic, by the way, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a European setting, but to have that broader, cosmopolitan, global, international perspective in the hobby, I think is going to be welcome. So I do think so. And with with the nature of wargamers today and the youth and the international aspect and the growing diversity of it means that I think the hunger is there. I think it's demonstrated by what's being produced and consumed. The hunger is there for a greater diversity in perspectives as well. So yes, I do think that gap is there.
Carlos, ¿cuándo está prevista la llegada de Almoravid?
Bueno, pues si todos los cálculos y todo se cumple, como sabéis, depende también del transporte desde la imprenta. Esperamos a Almoravid llegue para nosotros el mes que viene, es decir, en mayo, ¿no? Exactamente la fecha no la tenemos todavía porque no nos la han dado, pero la estimación de llegada será para mayo. Por lo tanto, pues el mes que viene la gente que quiera comprar la edición de NAC Wargames del Almoravid pues podrá acceder a ella, que creo que es algo que está bastante esperado por el público español y porque hay mucha expectación con el tema de las mejoras y de las correcciones que se han hecho después del balanceo y todas las erratas solucionadas que Volko me ha ido facilitando y esperemos que tenga una gran acogida al juego, la verdad.
Seguro que sí. Dinos, ya que tenemos a Volko aquí, ¿qué es lo que valorarías más o qué destacarías sobre Volko como autor y sobre Almoravid como juego?
Hombre, qué decir de Volko. Antes ya he dicho alguna cosilla que he dejado bastante claro cuál es mi opinión personal sobre él como autor, ¿no? Y creo que es un autor rompedor que ha ido siempre innovando y trayendo al hobby ideas nuevas, cosas frescas, cosas que ha ido añadiendo en una nueva perspectiva de lo que son los wargames. Ya lo hizo con los coins y ahora lo ha hecho con la serie de Levy en campaña. Además de que hizo un gran juego, por ejemplo, o un par de gran juegos para mí, como fueron el Labyrinth en su momento y el Wilderness West, que creo que para ser un card driven es uno de los que, bueno, lleva muchísimos años, lleva ya pues veintitantos años y sigue el juego jugándose, ¿no? En todo el mundo. Y de Volko pues solo puedo decir que veo que es una fuente de idea y de imaginación. Que siga en ello, que descanse bien por las noches para que siga discurriendo de esa manera, innovándonos, porque aprendemos mucho y nos da muchísima riqueza todo lo que él trae. En cuanto al Almoravid, ¿qué decir de Almoravid? Almoravid creo que es el juego que la gente debe de tener, al menos de la serie de Levy en campaña. Yo sé que Neski fue el primer número de la serie, pero en especial para el público español, al ser Almoravid, tratarse del espacio geográfico que se trata, que es el nuestro, ser parte de la historia de España, traer varias innovaciones como trae, hacer que vivir una época tan memorable como fue la época de la Edad Media aquí en España y la vivencia de esos dos mundos españoles que hubo en la Edad Media, que fue el mundo musulmán y el mundo cristiano, pues creo que hace que Almoravid sea, una vez que la gente conozca el juego, un gran descubrimiento. Además, el juego tiene muchísima profundidad. Tiene, por cierto, algo que también quiero destacar, que Volko lo dirá también, que es un trabajo también en el libro histórico que hizo Albert Alegre. Un trabajo brutal, ¿vale? Fantástico. Y quiero aquí también decirlo porque creo que Albert trabajó muy bien de la mano de Volko. Y es justo reconocérselo también porque Albert hizo un trabajo también muy bueno. Y yo creo que Almoravid va a ser un gran éxito y desde aquí darle las gracias a Volko por habernos hecho traer un trocito de nuestra historia a través de Almoravid, esos 2 años tan importantes de la Reconquista, en donde cae Toledo en manos de los cristianos y que la gente esté seguro de que lo va a disfrutar muchísimo.
Pues bueno, hasta aquí la entrevista. Ha sido súper interesante, con una perspectiva internacional por primera vez en el Bunker de NAC y hablando de Almoravid con su autor. El próximo juego que vamos a traer inmediatamente, ya habéis oído a Carlos, el mes que viene lo tenemos aquí, y así que va a ser, yo creo, el juego que jugar, el Wargame del verano para todos los aficionados. Pues muchísimas gracias, Volko, por estar aquí con nosotros. Ha sido un placer enorme y bueno, esperamos seguir tu trabajo de cerca y que NAC traiga muchas más adaptaciones de todo lo que hagas en el futuro.
Volko,
Bueno, yo digo que ha sido impresionante estar con Volko aquí. Creo que le hemos hecho alguna pregunta que no le han preguntado ya en todas las entrevistas que ha tenido. Creo que hemos sido algo innovadores en alguna pregunta. Espero que hayamos sido innovadores. Tampoco me he visto todos los vídeos. Y desde aquí agradecerte, Volko, pues tu tiempo, sobre todo, por estar aquí y bueno, y tu saber hacer y tu manera de promocionar el Wargame, ¿no? Que para mí, bueno, eres un referente. Gracias.
Volko, vienes a tu casa, NAC Wargames es tu casa, España es tu casa y aquí te esperamos siempre. Y un abrazo de corazón.
I want to thank you for the generous words and for having me in for this conversation. And especially thank you to NAC for giving Levy and campaign Almoravid this opportunity, which is very exciting for me personally. And I can't wait to see the finished product.
Pues eso es todo. Muchas gracias a todos y nos vemos próximamente. Nos vemos próximamente en otro Bunker de NAC. Un saludo.
Nice to see you.
Gracias.